It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, my co host, Ian Rivers. And Ian, another great day to be a Beaver as we get ready and get into the thick of the fall sports season. Ian, the Beavs are for sure rolling.
Yeah, I think fall sports have been pretty good for the Beavers. It kind of picking up right where they left off last season. Maybe a little bit of a hiccup, like we discussed for the first week of the soccer team, but even some of the other untouched sports are having some success so far this fall.
Yeah, and let's dive right in. Let's talk a little bit about those sports. First off, I'll start, Ian, since we were just talking about this before we hit record to get going. Bemidji State women's cross country, Mary Goodwin breaks her own program record in the 4,000 meter with a new time of 14 minutes and 23.8 seconds at the Dragon Twilight. Overall, Goodwin placed fourth in the meet. So congratulations to Mary Goodwin. 14 minutes and 23.8 seconds to run 4,000 meters is a lot. And it's way better than anything I could do. So congratulations to that.
Congratulations to her, setting a program record. The men's golf team, if you remember from last spring, is also making some headlines. Logan Schupp, sophomore, is off to a strong start in the fall season. He won the 72nd annual BSU Invitational to lead the Beavers in the first fall tournament. Of course, this is courtesy of bsubeavers.com. The Beavers overall placed fourth out of 8 in the BSU Invitational. Not a bad showing from them. And, of course, congratulations to Mr. Schupp for winning the first tournament of the year for the Beavers.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about men's golf. They had a couple senior contributions, and we were kind of like, is this
There
the
was a
year
lot of underclassmen last year that were doing a lot for golf.
But they were kind of headlined by the seniors escaping. But yeah, there was like that undertone, and to see that kind of continuing is a very good sign because we talked a lot about them towards the end of last season of Beaver Banter. So it's good that we get to remember them a little bit.
Yeah, very good that they're carrying on their success from last spring. That's always good, and hopefully they can. I think they have a couple more events coming up still this fall before they take a little break and head indoors for the
A little
9-month
break. It's
Bemidji
gonna be like
winter.
8 months, yeah. And
Yeah, but I think only other news to touch on is, of course, head football coach Brent Bolte passing Jeff Tesh, I believe it's Jeff, for second all time in BSU wins. So I think he had 54 so far in his not super long tenure. I think he's done a pretty good job. That's credit to him for doing it in such a short amount of time, becoming the second overall in wins for BSU.
well, when you think about it, Bolte took over as interim head coach in the fall of 2016 right away. It was the first week taking over for Tesh, ironically. And, people were on campus at the time know it was a strange set of circumstances that, had that happen. Bolte got the job. He was the offensive coordinator at the time, and he just ran with the program, and he'd taken it to a point. Bemidji State was trying to build back up their football program. They were in a decent spot, but I think Bolte's just been able to kind of raise that ceiling for the program, and you've been able to see it since 2016, 17, 18, 19, no 2020, 2021, 2022. So, 6 seasons plus 2 games is how quickly he's been able to do this. That's impressive. And it just goes to show, Bolte had the program. The program was in a good spot when Bolte took over and became the head coach, but he's been able to just take it to another level, which is what's been impressive about this run. He's gotten guys like Brandon Alt here. He's gotten, Bolios. He's gotten, a whole list of guys who have been in this program and who have succeeded as a part of Bolte's program. And to have him get that far this early is really, really impressive and really a testament to where Bemidji State football is at as a program.
Yeah, I think in football is just kind of a headliner as to some of the other sports too that ever since like 2015, they've just taken off. Soccer, football, of course, hockey's always been a big thing, but they've had some success getting to the tournament, winning a game. Even softball, some of the emergence of softball and men's golf, as we talked about for last spring. I think the entire university athletically is on the up and up. And even, like we said, it feels like almost every week that you go on bsubeavers.com, you're looking at a new program record broken by a cross country or a track runner. And so there's plenty to be excited about in that aspect as well. And very exciting to have Bolte, who is seemingly early on in his tenure here at BSU, already breaking these second place records and hopefully not too far from taking the lead.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm not sure what the exact number is or how much Bolte needs to get. I think it's weirdly really high. But like you said, I mean, he's on a, if we're just talking, not necessarily, is a mathematical path, I'm not sure, but like in terms of like just the path of the program's in a good spot. He's still young enough. Like this program is going to be in a good spot if they can keep the train on the tracks here, which all signs indicate that they have the talent and they have the coaching and that they're able to do. So it'll be really fun to watch this program over the years. Good job by Bolte for getting to that career milestone there. Anything else, Ian, with kind of our quick news headlines here before we take a look at some of the sports happenings over the last week?
No, I think the rest of the headlines are pretty much driven by what happened over the weekend in terms of some of the fall sports. And really quickly, we'll touch on volleyball. They obviously played in the Mountain Lion Classic, like we touched on last week. They started off 0-3 over their first 4 games of the weekend, losing 1-3 to Western Oregon, 2-3 to Colorado Springs, and then at St. Martin's they lost another 4-set match, 1-3. And then they had a 5-set match against Western Colorado, and they ended up winning that one 3-2. So they improved their record to 3-5 on the season. And when you're looking at that record from the outside, without any perspective on what this program has been for the last, while, I think you think, oh, it's a mediocre volleyball team. But, for us, for a team that went 4-24 overall last season, I think that's a very good starting point for non-conference play. They only won, I believe, 1 game in their non-conference slate last season. So to triple that, I can't imagine. I'm not going to go ahead and predict that they triple their wins. I think the NSIC is one of the more premier. I don't want to say
it's going to be
premier, but it's a good volleyball.
It's a very good volleyball conference. Yeah, exactly. And they've had that reputation for a while. So for them, like you said, to get 3 wins is good. They got to try and get to that 4th one to at least get to last year's total. But again, they're in a much better spot than they were a year ago. And, you just got to build that thing up one little victory at a time. And that's a good place to start, is having a decent non-conference run going up into the mountains, at least getting 1 win. They were able to split in that tournament like we talked about last week in Nashville. So all they can pretty much do now is see what happens when they get into conference play. There's going to be some good teams that they're going to come up against, but they're in a much better spot than they were a year ago, which, as you mentioned, Ian, is a very good thing right now for the program.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of future up and coming matches, they have 2 games coming up this weekend, both on the road in Moorhead, Minnesota, obviously against the MSUM Dragons. And then they go to Aberdeen to play Northern State. Northern State right now on the season sitting at 7-1 through their non-conference slate. And MSU Moorhead, same as Bemidji, they're 3-5. So maybe, just maybe, that's a game that BSU can sneak away with. And I think this is really going to be where we can finally see what type of a team Bemidji State's going to be. Because if they go in, kind of like basketball last year, CJ, men's basketball, that is, where they went through the non-conference slate and they were pretty good. And we were like, man, is this just because we're playing these cupcakes in non-conference? And then they'd win these games and they'd split almost every weekend. And we're like, okay, maybe they're kind of legit. So this is kind of going to be when we find out what this BSU volleyball team is going to be this season. And I think that there's a decent chance at least to pick up a split on the road this weekend.
Well, we talk about it with hockey all the time. And, we'd say the meat and potatoes of the CCHA schedule. And I think it's the same thing with the NSIC and volleyball. Like, this is really where you just find out what kind of team you have, because you can try and, pick your battles a little bit more with the non-conference schedule. And again, we don't quite know, and we'll really know once we get into the conference part, but it's a good volleyball conference. Teams know each other very well. Teams are a lot more comfortable playing in their facilities. Like it's that kind of a vibe that that'll be interesting to track throughout the rest of the season. And like you said, I think MSUM is a gettable opponent. I think if Bemidji State can split on the weekend, it's a very good situation. Going into Aberdeen is going to be tough, but a split is on the table. And if they're able to do that, then do we have like this exuding confidence? Not quite yet, but at the very least, it's okay. They're able to keep the train on the tracks for a week and keep that momentum going and kind of push it through into next week and see what happens.
Yeah, I think even for the basketball team last year, the men's basketball team, it took us a long time to really grip the fact that they were kind of a contender. I think there was maybe a game against Moorhead late in the season where they won in overtime, and I think we're okay. Yeah, no, that definitely we're here,
Mhm.
and that's when we realized that the BSU Beavers were a legit program. So it might take some time, but the more they win, the more confidence they and the fan base will build in their program success.
Exactly. So, Ian, if you're ready, let's talk women's soccer. They had a big game just yesterday. It was a big dispute on social media that we had between the Beaver Banter Twitter account, which you can go follow. You can also follow it on Facebook. You can also follow it on YouTube. And you can listen to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. But Ian, you guys, it was with our account. It was with Lucas of Beaver Territory, friend of the podcast, and the Bemidji State University Twitter account. We were trying to figure out what is the proper way to brand the matchup between the Minot State Beavers and the Bemidji State Beavers. Did we come to a consensus on that?
I think the Bemidji State University X page, they kind of made it a decision, and they said let's go with Beaver Battle, because I said, we had this discussion I think at one point last year, and I just said this is what we kind of came to, and they said Beaver Battle it is. I think so. I think we're going to go with Beaver Battle from now on, as long as I remember that. I think we've called it Beaver Bash for so long. It's going to be hard to change, but I think it's worth it. I think I like Battle more. It sounds a little bit more like you're trying to butt heads with them rather than just, hey, let's get in the pool. Let's have a bash.
Let's have yeah, exactly. We're just having a little bash. We're just gonna have a little, maybe could you say it in like golf or something? Yeah, it's gonna be a little beaver bash, whatever. Water polo, maybe. Some other niche college sport. Whatever. If we got I don't even know. I don't even know. That's the whole point. Is it's Beaver Battle. That's the proper way to call it. And it sure has been a battle for Bemidji State and Minot State in women's soccer the last couple of years. The last time these two teams met, Ian, was the NSIC championship game a year ago. And it was, again, the good Beavers are out on top as Bemidji State was able to win 1-0. Ian, you were able to listen to the game and kind of hear the highlights. What stuck out to you in the match?
I think it was just Bemidji State's control in the Minot State game. Yeah, like you said, I listened to both of these games. I kind of had the broadcast up on my phone. We were painting our new house this week, and so both nights actually that those soccer games were on, I spent painting. So I just got to listen to the Beaver soccer as I was painting, and every time I heard a little commotion, which conveniently was quite a few times over the course of the weekend, obviously with the 3-0 victory over Upper Iowa, which we'll touch on just briefly because of the fact that it happened. Upper Iowa is struggling this year to get going. I've heard they are 0-3 after BSU got done with them. But a 3-0 victory, I think maybe just like we predicted. But either way, that got the goal scoring moving. And then, yeah, like I said, against Minot State, I think it was just the control that Bemidji State had in the game. They dominated the time of possession. And I don't know if they keep track of the possession stats. I can take a look at that maybe in a little bit here, but they were making comments on it almost all game and just how much Bemidji State had controlled the ball and really controlled the tempo of play. And it was headlined by freshman Lucy Stanton. Her first goal as a Beaver was a good one. It came from outside the box. Wasn't necessarily a rocket shot, but hey, got up and over the goalie.
A little
And
bit of
that's all that
finesse.
matters. Yeah, it was. It wasn't like it was just some lucky goal. It was a really good positioning, really good placement on the kick, and it beat the goalie. And I thought, hey, this is what we need for the Beavers on both sides. They've, like we talked about last week, they are just cagey, man. They don't go forward. They don't attack. There's no goals ever. And I thought maybe this is what it takes, an early goal in one of these games in the 37th minute. And no, it was just more of the same. But Bemidji State kind of stayed on the front foot, had some more opportunities. Minot State had, a couple opportunities here and there, but it wasn't really that threatening, I don't think, for the Beavers from Bemidji State. And so a good 1-0 victory there and staying undefeated. The only team in the NSIC to complete their undefeated 4 games of non-conference play. Got a couple teams at 3-1, including that Minot State team who was undefeated before Bemidji State got to them. And then Augustana and Minnesota State have both also dropped a game. So really good game on yesterday, I guess it was Tuesday at 4:00. So I'm very impressed with what we saw over the weekend.
Well, and it should be quick to mention too that this game does not count for the NSIC standings, even though that these are 2 conference teams. It is technically not a conference game. It is technically a non-conference game. So that will not matter in terms of seeding for the NSIC tournament and whatnot, but it does matter in terms of the national ranking. It does matter in terms of the national perception. Minot State's a good team. They're a good program. They've been relevant. And for Bemidji State, they were at the Chet. They were able to take that home field advantage. They were able to win. And like you said, it's a 1-0 victory, which I know in soccer can mean a little bit more. But at the same time, it was, it's like you said, a dominant 1-0 victory where they just controlled everything. The game was played on their terms. And we talked about that a lot last season, Ian, with their defense is just so suffocating that they were able just to make everybody play their game. Even teams that had good offenses, they said, no, we're playing. Somebody's going to win 1-0. We don't know if it's us. We don't know if it's you, but this dang sure is going to be played the way we want to play. And they do a great job of that. I was able to watch that Stanton goal. The BSU soccer page put it up online. And it took me a second to even figure out where the ball was. And already they're celebrating because that thing was kicked a mile away. So it was a great kick by Stanton, the finesse, the everything, able to get it in. And it's just one of those feather in your cap wins. It's not like a BSU didn't need to make a statement. They're already good. But it's just one of those feather in your cap moments throughout the season of like, we know who we are. We're a good team. We're playing well. We expect to be a good team, and things are going to continue rolling throughout the season.
Yeah, I think it was a very good confidence building game, even though, like you said, it doesn't count for anything in the conference play. And now you just got to be that much more locked in once that day comes, I believe, in October, when they end up coming back on your slate, or you now have to travel to Minot to play them because they will be ready. You can count on that. And yeah, I don't have the possession stats at all. I didn't think that they tracked that. But there was a 12-4 shot difference between the two teams. Bemidji State with 4 corner kicks and Minot State with 0. And that tells you just about all you need to know about how dominant and how good Bemidji State was in this game. Of course, 12-5-1 all time against Minot State. So not bad there. In terms of upcoming schedule, we do have more conference play finally to look at after, I guess, just a couple of weeks. Non-conference action isn't necessarily the longest thing you've ever seen in Division II sports, but we head to Crookston on Friday, and then we're back home on Sunday against St. Cloud State, who is joined with Bemidji State currently at the top of the NSIC standings, even though there is no NSIC points there. Both teams those were the 2 teams that went 3-1 in non-conference play. And like we've said, take that with a grain of salt. You don't know who each team, or I'm sorry, wait. No,
Bemidji
we're not
State's
3-1. Bemidji State is 2-0. Minot and St. Cloud are both 3-1. So they have 3 wins. They're on top of the conference record-wise. Bemidji State is undefeated at 2-0-2, right behind those 2 teams. So
yeah,
Crookston, started off 0-4. They've been at the bottom of the standings pretty much the last couple of years in terms of soccer. So expect a pretty big win there, even on the road at Crookston. And then St. Cloud State, I'm going to say we're looking for a win. St. Cloud, maybe their program's on the up and up, but they've been kind of middle of the pack, I think, the last couple of seasons. So, again, if you're looking for the Bemidji State Beavers to conquer that regular season title that avoided them last season, I think, like we said, this is going to be one of the biggest areas of the schedule, taking advantage of this early slate before like October comes, and then you've got teams like UMary, Minot State, Augustana, Wayne State, Concordia, Minnesota Duluth, and Mankato all coming at you in that October and early November slate. So this is the opportunity to take advantage of the points. I'm looking for minimum 4 points from this weekend, but because that game against St. Cloud is at home, I think that gets us all 6.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you point out the schedule gets much tougher for Bemidji State throughout the women's soccer season, and it's not that they couldn't necessarily come away with that regular season title if things go poorly. Let's say they win again, they win their first game and they lose against St. Cloud State. It's not the end of the world, but at the same time, like your margin for error throughout the rest of the season just gets so much thinner, gets more thin at that point to where you have to really play well against, like you said, some of those teams like an Augustana, like a Mankato, like Concordia, St. Paul. There's just so many teams there that you have to play perfect against that it's going to be a lot easier if you can just set yourself up right now. To use like an analogy, it's like, let's say a team, let's just think of any team in the NFL. Let's say the Minnesota Vikings. Let's say they have a week 1 opponent called the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, they lose that game. It's not ideal. Now,
is that a team that was like projected to maybe get Caleb Williams before the season started or something?
In a made up scenario, we'll say maybe. The point is that, yeah, there's still a long season ahead. There's still plenty of time to control your own destiny. But at the same time, your margin for error the rest of the way just gets that much smaller. So it's the same thing with Bemidji State women's soccer. That it's not a must-win game at all against St. Cloud, but it's one that you should win. And if you don't win, it necessarily is going to make that goal of the NSIC regular season title very much tougher throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, Bemidji State really got off to a slow start in conference play last year, all things considered. They started off their first 8 games. I'm just doing really quick math here, but I think they got 15 of a possible 24 points.
There's a lot of ties in there.
Yeah, a lot of 3 draws, a loss, and of course 4 wins scattered in there as well. And then for the back half of their schedule, win, tie against Minot State, and another win. So they tried to make up as much ground as they could, and they did. They rocketed up from the middle of the conference. I think they were sitting down around 5th or 6th after that first 8 games, and they shot back up to 2nd place. So a good start there, but you want to get off to a little bit of a hotter start this year in conference play and kind of control your own destiny coming down towards the stretch.
Well, again, it's like we talked about. You can do it, and Bemidji State has proven that they can rattle off a bunch of wins at the end and do it. At the same time, it's like, you don't want to set yourself up to have to do that because you're not always going to be able to do that, even if you are good. Like there's just some sports are weird and fluky and some things can go out of your control. Like Bemidji State football last year, they had a rough first 2 games, 2 very tough opponents, and the rest of their schedule was easy. But we talked about a year ago at this time where like they have to go perfect the rest of the way if they even want a chance. And they did. Now, if they started 0-2 this season, would there still have been a chance? Theoretically, yes. Theoretically. But at the same time, like, why put yourself in that position? So, women's soccer, I expect them to win both these games over the weekend. But, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a draw in there against St. Cloud State, but I'm going to go with a win.
Yeah, I think either way, they'll probably be fine. You just got to get to the top 8, and you're in the NSIC tournament.
Obviously, they've won that before.
Yeah, obviously we have higher aspirations than that for this team, but we'll have to see how it goes coming down the stretch. Like we said, I think we're both predicting 6 points out of 6 this weekend, and hopefully best of luck to them.
Roll Beavs, baby. Roll Beavs. So, Ian, let's do some football here. Let's change gears. And before we jump into all of the kind of football talk at Bemidji State's game at Southwest Minnesota State, why don't we do a little bit of around the NSIC? Do we have that ready to go?
I do. Yeah, so some notable scoreline kind of pounding Minot State 56-14 in Moorhead, Minnesota. Augustana traveled to Chadron, Nebraska to beat Chadron State 27-3. Winona State with a 33-8 win over Concordia St. Paul. In Winona, Minnesota. Sioux Falls traveling to Bismarck, North Dakota to beat UMary 36-17. Of course, Bemidji State, like we'll touch on, over Southwest Minnesota State and Marshall. Maybe I shouldn't have spoiled that, but either way, Minnesota Duluth going to 2-0 after beating Northern State 41-21 in Aberdeen. So the Wolves off to an 0-2 start, pretty tough for their season so far. And then in Mankato, Minnesota State beats Wayne State College 31-14. So obviously
Pretty
the
much
only
everything breaking as we expect.
yeah, not much in terms of upsets this week. I did watch. So, like I said, I had to go to the Gophers. I didn't have to. I got to go to the Gophers game at 6:30. But before that, Winona State played at I believe 1 o'clock, and that is our opponent next week. And I can touch on what I saw kind of from that game when we break down what's going to go on next week. But for now, like I kind of led into, Bemidji State 34, Southwest Minnesota State 14. CJ, kind of tell us what you thought about this game.
I thought Bemidji State played a really good game. I thought all things considered, there isn't a ton to necessarily there's not a ton to like look at as, oh my gosh, I saw this and this and that. I got some notes here. I thought they were efficient, but not necessarily exciting. They had some big plays, they had some chunk plays, but there was no 40-yard touchdown pass by Alt. There was no big giant play. It was just them methodically moving down the field, which, as much as I'd love to see them gash the defense, you also need to be able to do some of those kind of drives. And so I thought they were efficient, but not necessarily exciting. And McCray, defensive lineman, I'm going to call him Big Play McCray because he had a couple sacks in the game. He recovered a fumble for the gangrene defense. Pass defense, I know you mentioned this last week, Ian. They're prone to a little bit of some big plays. They gave up a couple big plays as well. But again, you're going to give up some of those every once in a while. There's also a couple penalties on some deep passes. So just more, am I concerned by it? No, but it's just more like keep an eye on it throughout the season. And so the pass defense, again, with a little bit of a question mark. I mentioned this to you, Ian, while you were getting ready for the game and while I was watching the game, that all respect due to the announcing crew for Southwest Minnesota State's broadcast of that game on the live stream. But that thing, my man, was brutal. It was like, I understand that they're Southwest fans. Like, that's totally fine. Like, but also it's just not good. Like, it was
Yeah,
not
watching on the
not
NSIC network, you kind of expect even on Flow Hockey because it's the same thing. It's the home team that broadcasts, and so it's kind of you get a little bit of that home broadcaster bias, of course. But just in terms of the broadcast analysis and like the way that the broadcast is put on in general, I think Bemidji State does a pretty good job, all things
they do really
considered.
good.
They've got to be top 5 in the conference when you consider all of the aspects of what goes on into a broadcast.
And it's not just the play-by-play commentary, which is good. It's also like you said, it's the full-on production because that was again, Southwest Minnesota State wasn't bad by any stretch in terms of production, but it wasn't great. Like the camera angle, it always felt like they were chasing the play. But when you watch Bemidji State's games, they've done a really good job. And I remember even when we were in school, that was like a requirement of like, and I had to work games for the athletics department. I was helping take stats, but like we were in the media department, part of it was you had to go do camera for a game or you had to go work at some point. So I would see like all those guys out in like a cold November game have to sit up on the big old on the blanket on the platform that raises you up and all that freezing out there. But they do a great job and they still do. So props to everybody in the integrated media department for doing a great job with that because it really is important for us to watch. And it's important for us alumni because we always can't make the trek up to Bemidji for games. So for us to be able to get that good of a broadcast and that good of production quality is A1. It's really great. So good job, everybody, on that. But yeah, I thought the announcing crew, just a little home bias. And also, like, when they tried to analyze stuff, I thought it wasn't very good either. Like, it was very bare bones and basic. So all due respect, I'm sure they're great broadcasters. Sure, they're really nice guys. But also when you're getting clobbered by Bemidji State, how much really can you get invested into the game should also be pointed out as well.
Yeah, sometimes it gets really tough depending on how the game is going. And yeah, just looking over the box score, I'm seeing some pretty good stuff from the run defense. I think a total of 59 rushing yards. And of course, in college, man, I really wish that they did not count sacks against your rushing total. I think it
hate that.
completely skews your rushing stats because it just makes it so hard to tell how good a defense actually is. Like BSU ran for 158 yards in the game, but they only got I don't even know if they got sacked. They just went backwards 3-1-1. So overall, you're looking at a total of 153. And then you've got a negative 38 for SMSU. And so it's only a total of 59. But I'm assuming as Marcus Martin is the quarterback, he got sacked a few times, and that's why he lost 37 yards. It just throws the whole thing off. It's always so frustrating to try to look at a box score and assess how good a team's run defense actually is when sometimes they might just have a good pass rush.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, really tough to tell. And you're talking about BSU's run numbers offensively. I thought they really made a point to run the football. And maybe it was because they got ahead early. But they really made a point to run. And I think they've done well in that department. It hadn't necessarily showed up again in a lot of big plays, but I thought they did a decent job at that. And when you look at I'm moving on to my next point here. A little bit of a nitpick is with the offense, particularly, is they could have won by a lot more. They missed a chip shot field goal, which again, college kickers are always a little tough. So I'm not going to put a ton of blame on the kicking game. You always know that that's for better or worse, kind of a crapshoot with kicking in college, like even in Division I. Like kicking in college, like never trust your kicker. It's just
even in the NFL right now. I mean,
there's too many variables with that stuff. So my point is offense needed to finish a couple drives that I thought they should finish. But again, they still won 34-14 or whatever the final score ended up being. So it's not necessarily, did I think, oh my gosh, like they were about to lose that game. Now, no, but what it is like, if you want to get to where you want to go, which is to make a run in the NCAA tournament, you're just going to need to kind of finish some things here and there, clean some things up. Especially early in the third quarter, they had a chance to just bury it and not even make it a blowout, and could have all resting for the final 10 minutes of the game on the sidelines while QB2 gets some work. But they didn't necessarily do that. So that's, I have in my notes here, like that is a nitpick. So like, I'm not trying to use that as a fault. That's just more of like looking from like a 10,000 foot view. Anyway, my immediate view is this defense hits. The Beaver defense hits, and like all clean, like all good stuff, but like they make sure, like how many times I heard the broadcast go, the guy gets a 5-yard catch and gets lit up as it, like even the broadcast, like they are getting, it's just not fun when you're the opposing team and you're like, okay, cool. I get the ball in open space and here comes some linebacker or safety wheeling into to just obliterate me in the next Tuesday. That matters for teams. That matters no matter how good a player is, no matter what level of football they're playing at. If you have a defense that just constantly is able to lay the wood down, it matters throughout the course of a game. And the defense hits. The defense is able to make some big plays. They had a couple different fumble recoveries in the game. They've been able to cause some turnovers here and then. They've been able to consistently get to the quarterback. Again, big play McCray doing his thing a little bit. And so again, the defense has been playing really well, and I got one more point, Ian, but let's talk about the defense for a second in that game and in the first game that you saw. Did you kind of see that too with the hitting, or am I just on a 1-game sample size?
Yeah, I guess I didn't notice them hitting necessarily super, like it didn't jump off the page. The one thing that I really took away was the secondary and how hard they played the run. I thought they did a really good job of that in the first game, because every time there was a missed tackle or, they just didn't get him down quite fast enough, there was always a secondary player there, whether it was a corner or a safety or like even the linebacker. Just once the Northern State guys at least hit the second level, they did not continue to run past that. So I thought the run defense was really good. And it probably was. I mean, there was some big hits, that I can remember, kind of runs off the edge, just getting hit up by a linebacker that was playing out in the slot. And now hey, what are you doing out here, man? So yeah, go ahead. I didn't notice anything huge, but I believe you. They got some dogs on the line.
Well, it's like you said, like they make a point to stop the run game. And what's the first guy gets his arms around the carrier, and what's the other guy coming in supposed to do? He's coming in to finish the play. And like you said, they've just been able to do a really, really good job of that. And they've been able to help that out. And again, if this defense can be a little bit better and the offense can keep putting along at the rate that they've normally been, this team is going to go far. They'll go further than they did a year ago. But my one question, and this still through 2 games, we haven't quite gotten an answer for it, is there's his first name's blanking on me, but Lehman is a wide receiver. There's Del Duncan Busby. There's Brennan. There's a couple of guys. And now Del Duncan Busby is wide receiver 1, but like Brandon Bolio was always that guy. He was always the guy it seems all went to throw to. Now they obviously have a rapport. Those guys went to high school together. Like they play college, like obviously. But who is that guy that Alt's going to look to? And how is that distribution going to look in terms of who he's throwing the ball to? And when it's 3rd and 7, who's the guy that Alt is looking to? Who's that play going towards? And we don't quite know that yet. And I think that's something that we need to kind of follow throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that can be worked on. There was so much of Brandon Bolio last season, and even Del Duncan Busby. As you see, he's been the one guy that's been leading the box score in terms of receiving for the first 2 weeks. And then, guys like Joey Barron, Jake Hill, Drayton Lamont, or however you pronounce that. These guys are just getting their feet wet. Obviously, some of these guys have been on the team and they've gotten some receptions before, but to really build that chemistry, yes, not in this volume, to really build that chemistry, I think what we'll see over the course of the season is those wide receivers and Alt get more comfortable with each other. And then, obviously there'll be different factors like the cold will start to creep in. And so maybe it'll kind of balance out and it'll be like this all season. But I think the chemistry will come. The more they practice together, the more they work together, it can only get better, I would assume. So, yeah, right now we're looking for that second guy to kind of step up. Obviously, Duncan Busby has been a guy that's led the box score at least so far for the first 2 weeks. He's a big play for receiver. He goes downfield and he can get the ball. But I'd like some more intermediate receivers kind of underneath if we ever need a 4-yard first down,
Yeah, exactly. And here's my thing with that is, like I get that there's time and again, it's week 2, we're going into week 3 there. So I'm not trying to, again, this is like falls under the nitpick category. I'm not trying to say that there needs to be like a big panic button hit. But they've been practicing together all summer. Alt is in his 7th year, and there's, these guys aren't, it's not like he's got a bunch of true freshmen, which would be my point. But again, you're right. Like they haven't had this high volume of snaps together of where like, hey, I know you were like expected to be like the 4th option last year, but now like you got to be like 2 or 3. Like you have to kind of adjust to that. You're going to be covered against their 2nd best corner instead of their 4th best corner. Like things are going to be a little bit more different. So that's the one thing is it's not that they haven't had any time, but yeah, like you said, like they're going to get the game reps, which are more important than anything. But so that's where Bemidji State stands. But they play a tough team in coming up next week. Who do they got on the schedule, and what do we got to look forward to?
Yeah, I think final thought, just wrapping up Southwest. I think it's good. This is exactly what we needed because last year, like we said, these little nitpicks last year, we weren't able to nitpick because it became a big problem right away.
There was a panic button hit right away.
We jumped into the season and we didn't have any of this stuff figured out. And so we started off 0-2 and, now we've gotten these a little bit easier schedule to start off. And now we will jump into probably our hardest opponent of the season so far in Winona State. Winona will be making their 3rd trip up to Bemidji in probably the calendar year. Not exactly sure what date.
In the last 12 months, for sure, yeah.
I don't exactly know what date it was.
I think
it was
like
about week 3.
Yeah.
It was week 3 or 4 last year for Winona State, heading up to Bemidji, and then, of course, the playoff game. So a very familiar opponent will be back at the Chet this year, Saturday at 2 p.m. And
it was week 3 last year. Yeah.
Week 3. So, yeah, like pretty much a year to the day almost, I'm sure. So Bemidji State, Winona State actually, 1-1 so far. They had that non-conference loss in week 1, and then they played against Concordia St. Paul, who is now 0-1 in conference, 1-1 overall. They won their non-conference game in week 1. So a 1-1 opponent coming off a win. And we've not played anybody that hasn't come off a win other than Northern State, who hadn't played anybody. So I think this is going to be an interesting matchup. Winona State looked good against Concordia. It was probably, I would describe it the same way, where I mean, they took control of the game right away. Like the third play of the game was a pick six for the
Mhm.
Warriors, and they brought it back, and the crowd was going nuts. But I think it was just kind of they were in control, and I couldn't tell if they were really on cruise control or if it was more of a, we're just because they were a playoff team last year, and they've kind of been on that same trajectory of Bemidji State, where the South just has those teams at the top, like Mankato and Augustana and Sioux Falls, and they were always just right behind those teams, and they couldn't quite claw their way up there. And then last year, you saw Wayne State and Winona just come out of nowhere, and both of those teams made the playoffs. So I think this is an interesting team. I don't really know what to expect. I probably have the same level of confidence going into this game as I did the game in the regular season last year, where we're
Mhm.
coming off of, we're coming off of two losses, and we're playing Winona State. We don't really know exactly. I mean, we think we're good because we played two teams really tough, and we only lost by a combined score of 4 points. But I think that's kind of where I'm at this year. Bemidji's looked pretty good in their first two games, especially the first game against Northern State. And then I think, on the road, a 20-point win in Marshall is nothing to spit at. So I project, I project a good game. At the very least, it'll probably be the most competitive. I expect in the third quarter, you're still going to see some competitive football. But I guess I don't know. Offensively, Bemidji State is averaging 41.5 points per game on the season. Winona State down at 28.5. And then defensively, Bemidji State second best in the conference so far, with 13.5 points per game allowed. Winona State at fifth, with 21 points per game allowed. So Winona not quite on the same level as Bemidji offensively or defensively, at least statistically so far this season. And I think, no disrespect to Concordia, but that's not a team that's never that's necessarily been at the top of the conference. So
No.
I'm looking for Bemidji State to try to jump out early and use their tempo and use their offensive firepower to kind of take control of this game.
Well, and remember, Bemidji State got out to a big lead in that first game last year, if I remember right. And then in the playoff game was kind of a different story because it was just cold, and you kind of have to change how you play in that game. But yeah, I mean, Bemidji State has got the two headed running back combination right now in Sage Booker and Ali Muhammad. That's been kind of leading them on the ground game. They're going to need a little bit from those guys if they want to stay in this game, or at least at least show that balance to their credit. If we're looking at the pass game, though, I mean, everything lives and dies off of Brandon Alt's right arm. That's pretty much how this offense is set up. And again, Del Duncan Busby being that deep threat. If they can, Bemidji State has been able to carve through the Winona State defense. So again, as long as Bemidji State's offense is humming along, the defense will be able to do its job enough. And I think it's kind of the recipe that they've had the last couple of years, and it's the recipe that they're going to need to do if they want to win against Winona State. But Ian, we'll kind of finish up the podcast talking about, what was that playoff game like last year, and is anything kind of replicable in this year's game?
Well, the playoff game was really cold, like you said. It took, I think it was still 0-0 at the half, and there was just a lot of sloppy play. The teams both looked like they just couldn't move the ball offensively. It was so hard to throw and catch and move anywhere on the field. Nobody moved more than 25 yards at a time before they had to punt or throw an interception. So it was kind of a sloppy game. Bemidji State got some momentum in the second half, and then Winona State fumbled, and then it just spiraled out of control, and it ended up being like 31-7 or something like that at the end of the game. Um, but I'm looking for maybe not the passing attack in this game. I'm looking for maybe the run game to kind of take charge. Right now, out of 13 teams in the conference, Winona State's rush defense has been the worst in the conference, giving up 259 rush yards per game over their
Dang.
first two games. And Bemidji State averages fourth best in the conference with 182.5 rush yards per game. So, we talk all this about Brandon Alt. And I'm in a similar situation. You brought up the Vikings earlier, and I'll bring up the Chargers now. We got this great quarterback named Justin Herbert. We ran the ball for 240 yards. take the pressure off of Justin Herbert's arm every once and then. Obviously, the Chargers still lost because their defense couldn't stop a ham sandwich playing quarterback, but that's not the case with Bemidji State. So I'm looking at them maybe to lean on the run game, especially if they can do what I said, jump out to an early lead, use that run game, because Winona's front seven apparently cannot stop Air Bud coming out of the backfield right now. So I think that's a very good recipe for success. Maybe use Brandon Alt early, get out to some, look for some big plays if there's nice weather, and then lean on the run game. And I guess even if there's not nice weather, just lean on the run game from the get-go, and you'll probably have the advantage.
Well, it's always the thing you run to set up the pass. That's always the old adage in football. How about you pass to set up the run? I mean, that's certainly something on the table. You get a couple of big pass plays, and you make sure that Winona State knows that they need to get their guys back and make sure they're ready to defend those intermediate to deep passes, and then you can just run right through them. And then when they start to cheat up and run, you throw it over their heads again. And I think that's kind of how you play it. And I think Bemidji State's in a good opportunity to do that. Like you said, Winona State gives up a lot of rushing yards, at least to have this season. And Bemidji State isn't a team that necessarily pounds the rock, but they do know how to run, and they can run it. They're a pass first team, but they also, again, we talked about with Booker, we talked about with Muhammad, like they have the backs to be able to do it. Their line will get the push. So yeah, I think that it is in play for them to run and have a good game on the ground. I think Bemidji State wins this game. I'm going to go 37-27 is my final score. BSU gets the win in this one.
I'm going to go a little bit lower on the scoring column. I think Winona State surprised us last year with how good they were going to be. And I think it'll be somewhere around, I'm going to go with 28-17, Bemidji State over Winona State. I think Bemidji State's defense is really cooking, and I think that they will, especially in the red zone, they'll hold the field goals and do what they can to help Bemidji State to the win. But I do think it will be a win for the number 10 team in the country. In terms of the coaches poll, Bemidji State jumped from 11 to 10. I know they jumped to number 7 in one of the polls. So
yeah.
Good for them. I think the
number
highest
7 supports my narrative, so I will say they are number 7.
Right, and then as you're looking at the overall standings so far, of course, we're only two games into the season, and not everybody's even played 2 conference games. But Bemidji State and Mankato both right now 2-0 in the conference. 3 other teams are undefeated at 1-0. That is Augustana, Minnesota Duluth, and Winona State. So even early in the season, this is a big conference tilt to get some of those tiebreakers should you need it coming towards the end of the season. So I think Bemidji State's going to roll in this game. I have no reason to believe otherwise. I think we'll be in for another good weekend of sports.
Moral of the story: the Beavers are rolling. This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, Ian Rivers, my co-host, and we'll do this again next week, breaking down all of the action going on across the Bemidji State Beaver territory. So we'll do this again next week, Ian.
Yeah, make sure you follow